Hello, is my sound working all right?
Yes.
Thanks. All right, so we can start. Welcome everyone to the final online class, because the next one is going to be in person. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, is there a question or? Right. Otherwise, I can just start right away. So yeah, the next lab is due quite soon. So I'm going to try and go as far as I can today into this chapter, and hopefully so almost finish it. So then yeah, on Thursday we finish it, and you get as much time as you need to finish the lab. Okay. Yes. So yes, of course, you can ask. Well, I don't interact with them, but yeah, they're there. So the question is, can we ask about past lab in the drop-in center? I would assume yes, because the drop-in center is there for this class, and obviously the labs are a big part of it. Yeah, so yeah, I think I may have made a mistake earlier on. I thought the exams might be online, but no, all the exams are in person on paper. Yeah, so in person on paper. Okay, so moving on to today's class. So all right, so here we were last time. We're discussing price interventions. So just to remind you, a price floor. So it may seem counterintuitive using this word, but the price floor is higher than the equilibrium price in the market. And the price ceiling is going to be lower than the price on the market, right? Because the price floor is somehow a limit that prevents you from going lower. And of course, it wouldn't make any difference if the price floor was lower than the equilibrium, because anyways, the equilibrium price is higher. So anytime the price floor is binding, so it's because it's higher than the equilibrium. And yeah, it leads to excess supply, because it means that the price is higher than what consumers would like to pay for that quantity. So then, yeah, suppliers would like to sell a very high quantity, but consumers are not interested. So in the end, yeah, you are fighting to sell to a small number of consumers if you have a price floor. Biggest example of price floor is, of course, the minimum wage. So in a competitive market, if the labor market was purely competitive, then you would just let people sell their workforce at whatever the price they want. But we deem for many reasons that are, that are quite complex, actually, that have to do with the variety of that have to, I don't want to go into detail. It's basically, a lot of people may not know the value of their work. So it just puts a sort of standard on how you should sell your effort. And that way it prevents abuse in some ways. So that's one reason. That there are many others. So it can, for instance, be to motivate people to get good education. Because if I know that I cannot go and work for $2 an hour, then I may as well get educated and warrant being paid $10, $20 an hour. So then I can find a job at that price. So it can motivate people to invest in human capital. Yeah, so any issue with my lab, I'm going to deal with them later. Yeah, now I have to go on with the class. Yeah, so what happens, but in this case, we don't have any of these ideas. Here, this is just a simple model where all the workers are the same. And you don't have any investments or any dynamic aspect to it. So in this case, what happens? Well, we set the minimum wage here. And here are, the owners of the firms are made, so the owner of the firms are made worse off because they are required to pay a higher wage than they would normally choose to. And some workers gain because then they get paid a higher wage, so they are happy. But not all of them gain because some of them would like to work and they cannot find work. So is it the reason why there is unemployment in the world? Is minimum wage the cause of all problems in the labor market? Most probably not. And any decent labor economist will say it's very complicated. There are many reasons why you have unemployment. But to a certain degree, you cannot deny that if you set the minimum wage at $100, then it's probably the case that many people will struggle to find somebody who's willing to pay them $100, even though they would really enjoy working for $100. So it's at the extreme, you cannot, it's an undeniable fact that if you set the minimum wage way too high, then of course it would create unemployment. Now, empirically, what did economists find? So we had recent Nobel laureates that, especially David Carr, that worked on this topic with another economist, Alan Kruger. And they did a lot of work on looking at what happened when you increase a bit the minimum wage in the US, comparing one state to the other, looking especially at fast food workers, and they couldn't find any effect. So at the level where the minimum wage is, so the consensus of economists is that it looks like at this level, the minimum wage doesn't have an effect on unemployment. Okay, so this is price floor. Price ceilings are the opposite. So price ceiling it happens when you think that the equilibrium price is too high. So you say, I think it's too high, so I'm going to set a ceiling to say that nothing can be higher than this. So it's a maximum price, and it's binding if the the equilibrium price would be higher than the price ceiling. And in that case, it leads to a interesting effect, which is that you set the price lower than the market equilibrium. So it means that consumers actually are very happy because they would like to buy a lot. But it turns out that since the price is too low, then producers don't want to supply all that much. So what do? Well, you sort of enter in a competition against your fellow buyers to try and find what you want to consume. And it's not clear who gets it and who doesn't get it. Is it so then you may get a queue, for instance, you may have to wait a lot. So there is, for instance, if you want to buy a Rolex nowadays, there's some sort of love for this type of watch. And Rolex says, we're not going to set the price too high. We set the price that had the value we think it is. But then they don't have a big factory, so it takes a lot of time to produce Rolex. And what happens? Well, you have to wait a very long time to get your Rolex, sometimes a year or more. Or if you have a nice restaurant where for some reason they decide to set the price at what they think is fair, but there's too much demand. Well, then you have to reserve and you have to wait 1 year, 2 years to get into this restaurant because they cannot increase the supply. So this is what happens when you have too many buyers. Yeah, so it's first come, first serve, and a lot of disappointment if you don't get it at the price that you would like to pay. And it may lead to even worse problem, which is black market, which we're just going to discuss here. So what is black market? Well, black market is if I realize that the price is too low. So here the price equilibrium would be E. So there would be Q0 and P0. And at this quantity, you have exactly the same amount of people who want to buy than the amount of people who want to sell, or the same quantity that needs to be bought and the same quantity that needs to be sold. But for some reason, the price is set too low. So this, you could imagine it's a government policy that set the price too low, but could just be that for instance, if there's a very famous artist that comes to town and they decide that the tickets of the concert is a certain price, which turns out to be quite low compared to how much people really like this artist. So then what can very smart people do? Well, they realize that, so at this quantity, so the amount of tickets that are going to be sold is this quantity Q2. But at this quantity Q2, then the marginal buyer would be willing to pay up to P2 here instead of P1. So what do you do as a savvy business person? You get in line very early in the morning and you just buy everything. And then you bring all the tickets back home and you wait until a few days later, and then you put them back on sale on the black market for a price of P2. And you wait for people to pay extremely high prices for your tickets, and you make all this profit there. So of course, you see that there's not a single person who's going to buy all the tickets, but yeah, they do try to buy as many as they can. Of course, that's a gamble. Maybe it turns out that the demand is not that high and you cannot resell them, so you're in trouble. But yeah, if black market exists, then that's a likely outcome. How is the quantity sold under the black market in this scenario determined? So in this scenario, so there's a price ceiling here. So price ceiling is set in stone. That's the price that must be paid, and it cannot be higher. So then you determine what is the quantity at this price that will be sold. It's when the supply curve intersect the price. So that's Q2. Right, so that's under that scenario, that's the quantity so obviously my concert example might not be perfect in the sense that in the concert, the size of the room is predetermined. So actually the supply is perfectly inelastic in some ways. But yeah, if you had any time when you had some elasticity in the supply curve, but still you set a price, so then you have a price ceiling. So that's the equilibrium quantity. And then at this quantity, how much is the marginal buyer willing to pay? It's willing to pay P2 here, which is very high, right? So you can pocket a big chunk of money. And of course, so artists are generally mad about this because they would like their real fan to pay a low price to come and see them. They really just like the love of their fans, but scalpers get in line first, buy all the tickets, and exploit the fans. That's how it is. Yeah, so the goals of price ceiling, you can have many. To restrict production, to set specific prices down, to satisfy some notion of equity in the consumption of a product. This you could argue if something is wrong with the the consumption of some good, then it might be a way to restrict consumption, although it might probably not be the best. So taxes would be probably better. Because taxes allow the market to adjust better, and it don't require the government to know as much as price ceilings would, because price ceilings are really stringent things. This number 3 here, what do we mean by that? Well, imagine there's a snowstorm, and there are not too many. So there was a snowstorm in the US a few days ago. 2022 blizzard, and then so some states may not be as well equipped as Quebec is, for instance, for dealing with snowstorm, and they might run out of shovels. So so then everybody wants to buy a shovel. So well, that's so most of the examples. So the question is, can you give one example of how to calculate black market? So if you get the equation for the supply curve, and you get the equation for the demand curve, and you know what the price ceiling is, then you just find the intersection, you compute supply at this price, and you get quantity. And then you know what at this quantity, you know what you compute the demand for at this quantity. I'm not positive that. So I think at the exam, really computing exact market equilibria may not be what we're going to ask you, but you never know. The exams change from year to year, but usually we are good with just giving graphs and having visual interpretations, but it's always possible that we do ask to do that. So in my lab, you get a lot of questions about this. Oh yeah, so I think I've seen this question on my lab, and so ask me later if there's a question on my lab that's complicated. I think there was a issue with this question last time too, probably. So my lab is quite good, although not entirely perfect. So yeah, if you have a problem with it, ask me and I'll try to solve it. Yeah, so back to my shovel example. So if you have a snowstorm, then and you have a small supply of shovels, who should get the shovel? So maybe people who really like digging, but mostly it's going to turn out that people who are really wealthy, can pay for a very pricey shovel, will get it. But we may say that this is unfair, because why would the wealthy be able to use the shovel to clean the snow and not the less wealthy? So we might see there's a price ceiling, so you're forbidden to sell shovels at a higher price than $20. And then what happens is, well, instead of who's willing to pay most, then it's who has the least value of their time and who are ready to wait 2 hours in line to actually get the shovel instead of not getting it. So at some point, there's some way that's going to be distributed. Either it's who's willing to pay, or it's who's willing to wait, or it's who's lucky. So yeah, it depends. Or black market, maybe I just go buy all the shovels and then I resell the shovels to the millionaires in my estate. Who knows? Yeah, so black market, of course, thwarts the government's objective because it's a way to circumvent the price ceiling. Rent control is an example of price ceiling. So yeah, that's an interesting case of it. So here you have the rent market, and you may remember that previously we have said we may have short-run demand, long-run demand, short-run supply, long-run supply. Well, here we have a nice example of short-run supply, long-run supply. SS is short-run supply of apartments. I gave the example in Paris of apartments in Paris as an example of perfectly inelastic supply. So that's true for all time in Paris. You cannot build more apartments, or very difficult. It's very difficult. But in the city like Montreal, it's still true that in the short run, you have a fixed supply of apartment. You cannot just change the market price and hope that 10,000 more apartments are going to appear tomorrow. No, it takes time to build them. So in the long run, yes, the supply will respond to a change in price. So you will have more apartments if the price go up, but in the short run, no. So what will, and then what happens if you set a price ceiling? Because you think, oh, it's unbearable that apartments are that expensive or houses are too expensive. In Montreal, in all fairness, it's not that expensive, but in many places around Toronto, or around Vancouver, it's just impossible to rent or buy anything. It's just super expensive. So as a government, you may say, okay, well, we're going to help the renters by setting a ceiling on the rental price of apartments. So instead of having this long-run equilibrium with high rents, you decide, oh, let's have a ceiling at RC. So what happens in the short run? Well, in the short run, this is pure redistribution from renters to apartment renters. From owners to renters, because they just pay lower, and there's no change in the supply of apartments. But then what happens in the long run? Well, in the long run, you see that there's still this long run supply. So in the long run, a lot of people are going to think, oh, it's not useful anymore to rent an apartment if the rent is so low. So I'm just going to not put my apartment on the market anymore. So I'm going to, and the supply is going to move back down. So again, the same thing happens. If the supply is restricted, then the few renters who are lucky to get this low price apartment are happy, but a bunch of them are would be would be very happy to have this apartment at this low price, but the supply is way smaller than the actual demand at that price. So what happens in practice? Well, you can have something like consequences. So apartments. how do you spell apartments? Yeah, apartment. Okay, I was okay. Always, yeah, I'm always having doubt between the French and English. Yeah, converted to what? Somebody have an idea? There's often loud music and loud guests there.
Airbnb.
Yeah, Airbnb, which may be much more lucrative. Yeah, so sometimes also so if you say, well, the rent is too low, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to then not take care of apartment. So then what happens is, well, if I don't do any repairs, then it becomes a very bad place, and it's a fair price for that that rent. So if the rent is higher, then I'm willing to put effort into making a nice apartment so that it's actually worth this much. But if I have to sell it at this or rent it at this price, then I'm just not going to repair it. Yeah, and also there is sometimes yeah, other thing that you might do is try to expel people by force, so that the yeah, this is called renovicting people. So if there is if you cannot hide the so sometimes it's not the problem is not that the rent cannot be put higher, but it's that you're forbidden to increase the rent while there is people inside the apartment. So then what you're thinking is, okay, well, if I change the people that live in my apartment, then I can set the price to whatever I like. So how do I do that? Well, I just tell them, oh, by the way, I choose to make a big renovation now, so you have to move out. And so that's not really because you plan on doing all that much. It's just because you want to get rid of them so that you're able to make the repairs. So all of these things are what? They're, again, ways to get around legislation. So this is something that you learn if you try to implement economic policies. Is you think you're smart, you think, oh, I'm going to solve the problem of high rents in Canada by setting this policy, but no, people are always smarter than you are, and they always find ways to deviate from the policy and in ways that may not be positive. Because this is bad because it makes people go and have to find another apartment. This is bad because it's better to have nice quality apartments rather than rundown apartments. This is bad because it's just a way to get around the legislation, and it actually reduces the supply of apartments. So all these things are worse than just letting the market equilibrium as it is, but that's what you get if people. Yeah. So I don't blame any government, like Trudeau government, or I don't blame them to not being able to solve the apartment problem because it's complicated. It's I'm not saying the situation is good, but I'm saying it's difficult to solve it. Yeah, so this is what this is a case in Ontario. So yeah, so it's not too interesting. More interesting is, yeah, so who gains and who loses. So existing tenants who can keep their apartment, who are not kicked out, then they're very happy because they're with rent control because they can pay lower rent. Landlords lose because they do not receive the rates that they would likely want to receive. But it's hard for potential future tenants because the supply of apartments gets lower and lower and lower. So yeah, the necessary supply will not exist. Alternative policies. So you might say, okay, so the problem is that we don't have market equilibrium. What about subsidizing instead? So subsidizing is you use everybody's money, so the taxpayers' money, to specifically pay people who get a cheap apartment, to give them a subsidy, for instance, or to produce cheap apartments, so social housing that you might say, or public housing. So to create more affordable apartments. So the conclusion of this, of course, is every policy has a cost. So here the cost is the government needs to pay for it, but it's not the government who pays for it, it's taxpayers' money. So it means that you and I are paying people to get a cheaper apartment. So how do we feel about this? Are we happy about it? I'm happy that some people get cheap goods, but it's nothing comes out of anything. All right, and here's my 2 cents, my personal 2 cents on this topic. So this is not the exam; it's just my comment on it. Something that I don't really understand about this is you say, oh, it's unfair that poorer people cannot afford an apartment in, say, downtown Montreal, where it's too expensive. And I say, yeah, it's sad that poor people cannot buy apartments, but what about the fact that poor people cannot buy other things too? So why is it so important that people with lower income cannot get an apartment in downtown Montreal, for instance? Maybe some person with lower income would be perfectly happy living in, say, Longueuil or some other places where it's not as expensive. And actually, if they have more money, then rather than moving to Montreal and be happy there, they would be perfectly fine living in Longueuil, but they would take the extra money and use it to educate their kids, for instance, or buy food. So why should we decide that we're going to make a choice for them to get an affordable apartment downtown Montreal rather than do something else? So the question I ask is, why specifically subsidize apartments? So why not simply make the tax system more progressive and let less wealthy people decide what they want to do with the extra money? So that's what I'm saying is it's paternalistic to decide for them, okay, what I think is fair is that you're able to afford a good apartment, but it's other ways to spend your money is not good. So yeah, I don't know who has if you have a comment on this. If they live in suburbs, we still subsidize them through the externalities they cause. Oh yeah, okay. So this is I'm not sure exactly what specifically you're referring to, but it's in the direction I'm going, which is that when you implement a policy like housing, for instance, it has to be justified by something that we're going to call market failure. So something wrong with the housing market, especially that justifies dealing with the housing market. This is good public policy in general, is you don't create a policy that targets something over there to maybe alleviate the problem down the road or somewhere else. You try to target your policy the most specifically you can. So if you really explain to me what's wrong with the housing market in particular, why is it's just so important that, so if you have an argument such as it's important for neighborhoods to have mixed income levels, then okay, if you say this is the reason why I'm doing it, I think it's very important that rich and poor people live side by side, then I think it's a decent argument. So, but you have to be more precise than just say, yeah, I think it's good that some people can afford the goods. Anyways, that's my 2 cents about it. Is there some comment on that? Otherwise, I'm moving on. Yes, Ravi?
So I think what government can do, they can limit buyers to buy more than one house or apartment or whatever it is per head, and compensate the recent buyers with the money they will lose when the new rule will come out and the market will go a little down. And then do not let new buyers buy more than one house. So every person get the equal opportunity to buy. And then it's all about the income and all about the hard work. Now you have one person buying 10 houses, and then it up the prices.
So it's what you're saying especially is I'm speculating. I'm buying a lot of it and hoping to resell them at a very high price. But if there is a price ceiling, then I cannot do it. Yeah, it might be it might be a perfectly good justification. So I'm not an expert in that, but I know. I met a person in the past who was doing exactly that. She was looking at new housing projects in Toronto and saying, "Oh, there's this company that's a very well-known company. And they are having this new project of a tower apartment there. So I know it's going to be done. So I'm going to in advance buy 10 or 100 units." And then once the tower is built, then I can make a profit by reselling these units up. So that would be possible to do it. Although in that case, there's the risk that the apartment doesn't get done, or so it's always a risk to buy something in advance. Is it like Facebook saying it takes a lot of work to stealing your data? I have no clue what you're saying there.
No, you just read to the comment above my comment, and then you can see the contest.
Okay. Anyway, so yeah, moving on. So market efficiency. Thanks. Yeah, so all right. So yeah, so imposition of control price generate benefits for some individuals. If it's a price ceiling, then it benefits suppliers. If it's a price floor, it benefits consumers. Does a policy legislate the minimum wage makes us whole better off or worse off? So this is very complicated. So yeah, minimum wage is what we know so far is at the minimum wage or around it doesn't make a whole big difference. Yeah, so economists use the concept, use the concept of market efficiency to address such questions. So this is what I was saying. So you have to tell us what the source of the inefficiency is, so that I can say, oh, so this is why this sort of market intervention is or isn't justified. So I'm just going to go deeper into market efficiency. So first of all, what's underlying demand and supply? So what do we mean by market demand? So market demand, as you know, it's how much people will want to buy a certain item on the market if the price is a certain level. What does that mean under it? It means that if I'm willing to buy, say, 10 units, this means that at this price, I think it's a good bargain for me to buy it. So it means that I get a good value out of what I spend. Otherwise, I wouldn't just not go to the store, because if, for instance, I value chicken $10 and the value at the store is $10, well, might as well stay at home, because anyways, I'm going to waste time to go to the store, buy it and come back, and I'm going to be worse off because I got the same value that I paid for. So why I do buy something is because I value it more than the market price. Same as for the supply side. So what's the supply? The supply is how much producers are willing to produce at a certain price. And this has to do with the cost of production, because what you're saying is if the market price is, say, $10, then my production cost for producing this item has to be lower than $10. Otherwise, I wouldn't produce it. So yeah, as well on the demand side as in the supply side, the price or the supply and demand represent value and cost. Yeah, so the demand side tells us the highest price that consumers are willing to pay for a given unit. And for each unit of the product, price on the market of the demand curve shows the value that consumers get from this unit. So we have yeah, better to move there. All right. So this is a more concrete picture there. So what this says is, imagine that there are 100 units on the market. So at this 100 units, then there's a bunch of consumers, these people there. So let me complete their curve there. All these people there would be willing to actually spend more than $20 to buy the units. But these are extra people there. There's extra units of pizzas. People would not be willing to spend the money on them. So it means, so that's why they actually to be able to for the market to expand to have as many people to buy these pizzas, then the market price would have to be lower. If the market price were, say, $20, then only these people would actually buy it, because only these people would get a higher value than $20 on the pizza. Yeah, so this is about the supply. So yeah, this is the demand. And the supply is the same thing here, but in reverse. So what is supply? So let me just say, imagine that the price is, say, 15. And let me put this black. So if the price is 15, why is the supply 300? Well, it's because it's possible for firms to produce pizzas at a price lower, or what we're going to say is a marginal price, lower than 15, until we reach a quantity of 300. And above 300, then it starts costing too much money for the firms to produce them. So that's why if you want to sell more pizzas than 300, then the market price would have to be, say, 20. So we're going to say that the supply curve is actually what we call marginal cost. So it's the extra cost that I have to incur to produce an extra unit. So if I'm at $200, what is the extra cost to producing one extra pizza? It's 10. So if the price is 15, then how much extra profit do I make on this pizza? It would be 15 minus 10. So and I would have paid 10. So I would have an extra benefit of 5. And so if it's 250, then it's probably 12.5. And if it's 300 pizzas, then the marginal cost, so the extra cost that it costs me to produce one pizza is $15. And so if the price that I can sell the pizza is $15, then I don't get any extra income. So as a producer, I would be indifferent of producing an extra pizza or not producing it if the market price was 15 and my marginal cost was 15. And here it would be too expensive. So this is why supply curve represents marginal cost, and this is why demand curves represent value for consumers. All right. And then what is the market? Well, the market is a decentralized way of maximizing what we call economic surplus. So what is economic surplus? Well, it's the difference between what an object produces as value for consumers, which is the blue line, the demand curve, and what the object actually costs. So if the quantity is 0, what is the surplus on the market of producing the first unit? Well, the first unit, there's a buyer that's crazy about buying this pizza, who would be here willing to spend probably $25 on it. And what does that pizza cost? Well, I just look at the supply curve, which is a marginal cost. Well, it's 0. So the first pizza is essentially free to produce in this, well, I think it's a bit unrealistic. But yeah, essentially the first pizza looks almost free to produce, and so the first person is crazy happy to buy it. So there's this whole benefit for the society of producing the first pizza. Then the second pizza, there's some cost to it, and the extra benefit is a bit less than the first one, but still it's positive. And then you see after 100 pizza, the net benefit or net surplus to the market is 20 minus 5. So it would be 15. So we will still go on, and we reach the market equilibrium, which is 250. So at 250, we know that here we say is the perfectly competitive market or free market, because we let people negotiate however they want on this market. And at this price, the market price is $12.50, and at $12.50, the marginal buyer, so the last person to buy a pizza, was exactly happy with or indifferent between spending $12.50 and not spending and buying the pizza, or not buying it at all. And the last pizza maker was indifferent between selling its last pizza at $12.50 and producing it with the cost of $12.50, or not producing it at all. So that's what we're saying. This is the best place that we can ever hope to be in economics terms. This is the nirvana of free market exchange. This is the holy grail of market efficiency. And you can think, what would happen if I increase the quantity further? So for instance, if for instance, for whatever reason, the market produced too much pizzas, so produced like 300. So at this quantity there, well, the extra cost of producing these pizza would be maybe $15, but the extra benefit for the person who buy it would be just 10. So this is inefficient, so it's a waste, because the pizza doesn't make people all that happy because there's too much of it and it costs too much. If I'm here, what happens is it's unrealized gain. So at this point, so there's positive gain on the pizza. So it's the person is getting a value of 15 and it costs only 10, but it would be possible to still produce a bit more pizzas and still generate benefit in the market. So really the surplus of that produced by this market, the economic surplus is maximized when the supply and demand intersect. And at this point, it's we get exactly this market price. Oh, I'm overtime, sorry. Yeah, I'm overtime, right? Or not?
No.
Oh, no, I'm going to until 10. Okay, all right. Sorry, I'm always, yeah, I'm confused between the morning and the afternoon. So yeah, now I'm good. So does that make sense? Is there any question about this, the generation of surplus? So this is pretty easy. If you want concretely, what they're going to ask you is stuff like, what is the total like willingness to pay or value that you generate if there's 250 pizzas? So it's all this zone there with this. But then what is the total cost of 250 pizzas? That would be all these marginal costs there. So it will be this whole triangle. So the surplus of the market would be this whole trapezoid area, sorry, minus this triangle area. So you get this triangle area there. And do you want to be able to compute the value of this surplus? Well, the value of the surplus, I can tell you quite easy. So value of the surplus. So it's the area of this triangle there. So it would be, if this is, say, 25, if the price here is 25, so it's 25 times, so it's 25 times 250 divided by 2, which gives what? Let me use Google to help me with this. So that's 3,125. So, and that's in dollar terms, all right? So that's the area of this triangle there. And you may want to compute the surplus that, or the surplus that goes to the suppliers themselves. So it's whatever is below the market price. So yeah, surplus to the suppliers. Or producers. So it's below the market price. And the surplus to the consumers. Yeah, I'm just going to let producers there. That's confusing. It's above. The market price. All right, so so what the consumers get is this. And what the producers get is this thing there. So we can see that everybody gains on the market. So this is the extra value that producers get from themselves by selling at $12.50, a quantity of $250, 250 pizzas. This is the value that the consumers get by interacting on this market. So because they would have been willing to pay 25, 24, 23, 21, etc. until this quantity there, but they actually pay $12.50 for all the pizzas that they buy. So the distance between the demand curve and the price is the value that the extra value that they gain by buying on this market, right? So I can even compute them. So it's 25. Yeah, so producers, it's 1250 times 250 divided by 2. So that's much. This amount, and for the consumers is this triangle there. So it's 25 minus 1250 times 250.
The same value?
What's that?
Isn't it the same value? Because 25 minus 12.5 is 12.5.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, here it's totally symmetrical. Yeah, but it's not going to always be that way. But yeah, so for this example, it's the case. Does it make, is my computation all right? Or yeah. And note that this $3,125, it's equal to the producer surplus plus the consumer surplus, which is of course 1,500 point, yeah, this plus this, right? So if you add up the surplus that the consumers gain and the suppliers, the producers gain, then you get the whole surplus generated by the market. All right, so questions about this? This is more technical, so here's the time if you're unsure. No, all right, you can ask me after the class anyways. So this is really this is a big part of economics, actually. Most of the time, a lot of things that we end up asking you is, please compute the total value of something or the surplus for this market participant or this other market participant, or the total surplus generated by a market, for instance. So this is why we say that market and perfect competition work well, because they generate as much surplus as they could. If the production was higher, then the total surplus would actually be lower. And if the production was lower, then the total surplus, here, for instance, you can very much see that if we set the production to 100, then the market surplus would be just this part there, this one part, and this 2 and 3 section there would be just lost. So this is why allowing the market to be at market equilibrium generate the biggest surplus that we can have. All right. So then what happens when you do control prices? Well, you lose surplus. So here we have a price floor. And as we've been saying, so price floor who gains, who decides what the quantity is exchanged on the market. Here it's the consumers, because producers would like to produce a very large quantity because the price is very high, but sadly the consumers are not having it, and they don't want to pay to buy all that much if the price is so high. So the actual quantity bought on the market is always the smallest of these two. So here is going to be Q1. So then at Q1, what is the surplus going to be generated? Well, it's just this section there. And you can see that producers, they gain essentially this extra rectangle that they didn't have, but they lose this triangle that they did have. Of course, for consumers, it's very sad because they lose this rectangle and they lose this triangle as well. So for them now, their surplus is just this small bit there. But yeah, so what does the market lose as a whole? Well, the market lose as a whole this whole area here, which we say is the deadweight loss. So this whole area here is this deadweight loss. All right, and here it's again, you can compute it easy. Well, we don't have numbers, but if we knew what the price is here, what the marginal cost is at Q1 for the producers, then you could compute that this triangle is Q0 minus Q1 multiplied by P1 minus this number that we don't have, divided by 2, and that would give you the total value of the loss of the total value lost in this market because of this intervention. So that's why we say if you want to intervene in a market, okay, do it, but make the case for it. So say, yeah, we think there's this big problem that's even bigger than the deadweight loss that's going to be generated by intervening in the market. Okay, what if the curves are bent? You mean if you have if the curves are, if it's not straight lines? Yeah, okay. So if supply and demand are not a straight line, so linear function, then you use integrals. So for those who don't know, it's calculus. So if you have, say, a straight line like curved like this and a curved like this, well, the definition doesn't change. It's always the difference between the demand curve and the supply curve for all the units that are exchanged on the market. Here it will be until Q1, for instance. So you would have to use an integral to do that. You would have to know calculus. So what do you conclude? We are never going to give you not straight line. All right, that's what you that's what you have to infer. It's, of course, I'm not expecting that all of you know calculus, so don't be scared. All the supply curves you're ever going to get, or demand curves you're ever going to get in this class, are going to be straight lines, or at least all the supply and demand curve for which we are going to ask you to actually compute something. So yeah. So if you need to compute something. Yeah, because we don't have time to waste doing a complicated math. So your life is going to be easy, trust me. Oh, and by the way, there's also another more subtle point. Yeah, don't thank me. It's just it's the course is like this. We don't ask you to know that. So yeah, but there's a more subtle point I want to make, which is it's probably much beyond this class, but still I think it's interesting to say it. So let me just maybe go back here. Do we actually know that this is straight here or here or here or here? No. This is uncharted territory. Nobody ever explored this thing. Why? Because we never observe a market of pizzas that have a price of 1 cent or $25. So since we never observed this, from a scientific perspective, we cannot know what would be the supply or the demand or what's going to happen there. All we ever observe is what is very close to the equilibrium. What we may observe is, oh, one day supply went up a bit or down a bit, or demand went up a bit and down a bit, and we can more or less know what happens around the equilibrium. But economists really have no clue what happens there. And we don't really care about it. So all we care about is measuring what? Elasticity of supply, elasticity of demand around the equilibrium. That gives us an idea of how much is gained or lost by something. But yeah, and by the way, we're never going to set say a price floor that's humongously high. We're never going to say that, tickets must be $1,000. That you're never going to see that. It's just that tickets would be like $10 and we set them to $12 maybe. So we can more or less guess or make an approximation that things are straight around here, but we have really no clue what's happening there. All right. Yeah, exactly. If something is too good to be true, it's a scam. All right. This is a very good lesson from real life. So if you think that some Nigerian prince really has 10 billions to offer you in some bank account, it's a scam. So don't go for it. All right. Yeah. So price setting, same idea. What time is it now? Okay. All right. So price setting, same idea. What do you get? Well, the short side wins. So it's between suppliers who want to supply Q2 or consumers who would like to buy a huge amount of goods. Suppliers win. You cannot force them to supply more. So then you know that the market quantity is the small one. So it's Q2. And what is lost on this market is all these units that could have been sold if the market was allowed to find its equilibrium by itself. So we would have had the price of P0 and Q0. All these units are not sold. So all these people would have been very happy to pay more. And these suppliers or producers that would have been happy to produce them because their production costs would have been lower than the value of the consumers. So this extra these extra sales or this extra market interaction would have been a benefit for the world, but sadly they are not meant to be because we have this intervention on the market. So yeah, it really looks like economists are saying never intervene on the market. You can never make things better. Why is that not necessarily true? Well, because markets can have many imperfections. Lack of competition is one, lack of information is another, externalities, public goods, all things that you don't learn in this class, or at least not yet, because we have to learn how market works well before learning how they work not well. But please don't quit this class after this lesson. because then all you're going to remember is, oh, intervention on the market is always bad. Not always bad. It's just you need some specific reason why you would like to intervene in the market. And if you don't, if the market is efficient by itself, then just don't intervene on it. Here you set a price ceiling and it creates some inefficiency on the market. So again, this is the deadweight loss here. All right. Right. So yeah, that's about what we want to say. Quotas. Well, quotas are almost the same as price floors. Why? Because if I set a quota, what I'm saying is it's forbidden for firms to sell a larger quantity than Q1. So then what happens? Then firms would have a low price, but consumers are willing to spend a lot of money on it. And so what we assume is, essentially, we cannot know if the price is going to be P1 or is going to be something very low. But what we assume is that who decides what price is going to be sold on the market price is the supplier. So the assumption is, do we say that here? Yeah, assumption. The producers set the price to P1. All right. So in a sense, you couldn't know really from just looking at this. If I don't tell you, actually the price exchanged on our market is going to be P1. And why is that? Well, it often has to do with who's asking for the quota. Yeah, so do you know what, do you know a real good example of quotas in Quebec?
Milk.
Dairy, yes. Example.
Maple syrup, I guess.
That's excellent. And what's the goal in all these cases? Well, the producers go to the government and say, oh, please allow us to control the market so that we can take advantage of our position. And what are they seeking to do here? So I'm going to get more in detail here. So what do the producers lose by setting the quota? Well, if there's no quota, the price is P0 and quantity is Q0, so they get all this surplus. Now they set the quota, so they don't sell all these extra units there. So this thing is less for the producers. But they do manage to sell at a higher price. Before the price was P0. Now the price is P1. So for the quantity Q1, so the units that they do sell, they're able to sell them at a higher price than they would have otherwise. So I'm going to have this say green. So this is a gain for the producers. And what you hope as a producer, of course, is that this gain, so the higher price you get to sell your items, is larger than this loss in terms of units sold. And if you, so realize something, if you set the quota too small, so here, for instance, then this gain would be for a very, very small amount of units, and this loss would be really, really big. So it means that the producers would actually lose from the quota. So they have to sell yeah, exactly. They have to set their quota large enough so that they gain something, but not so large that they actually sell so little that they actually lose in the process. Of course, consumers, they just lose a lot from this. So they lose this that goes to the producers, and they lose this from the units unsold. So they just get this at the end. So this is actually extremely bad for poor people. So rich people, well, they're okay with buying something that's more expensive, so they don't care. But if you think about really poor people that would really like to have their milk at, say, $2, and they have to pay it $2.50 or $3, it matters for them. It's so yeah, you could say maple syrup too, but maple syrup isn't all that necessary. But this is a point about redistribution. We're really just giving money to farmers, but taking it away from poor people, essentially. So I know that farmers are actually sometimes poor people too, and they're struggling. So it's not an easy call. I'm not saying but from you have to know that these supply controlled by farmers do matter for consumers. You and I, we maybe not care too much about buying our milk or our cheese at a higher price than it would normally be, but for poor people, it matters a lot. All right, so am I almost done with this? Yeah, so I could almost finish it. Yeah, so why do yeah, this is just something I've said so far. So why do governments intervene if it's always bad? Well, they do intervene in situations where it mandates intervening. And so we haven't showed you what are these circumstances. Here it's always, we start from an efficient point of view. So anything you do on the market creates a deadweight loss. So here you always have a deadweight loss that's here. But in some situation, it's good to do it. And from an efficiency point of view. And now from a redistributive point of view, then what you do is you sometimes redistribute from one group to the other, and here you're making a normative judgment. All right, so yeah, so normally we undertake positive analysis, we look at what's happening, and normative judgments are more done by society as in general or governments. Yeah. All right, so I'm happy we went through the whole chapter. So again, I'm here for office hours if you like. I'm not telling you in where the midterm is, so you have to find it yourself at random. No, I'm going to tell you, of course, as soon as I know where it is. Yeah, it's a surprise. It's a treasure hunt. I'm going to give you clues around Montreal for you to find your room.
Is the midterm going to be similar to the MyLabs?
Easier. It should be easier. Yeah.
Oh.
So not all that easier. Still, so there are lots of questions. So that's okay. That's something I may say to help you prepare. Okay. So to help, so this class, unfortunately, here's the bad news that I have to tell you, is as you may already know, you are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students taking this class. Mm-hmm. So what happens is Concordia takes it as a way to filter good students and less dedicated students. So they expect, so they are trying to make it quite challenging to pass. Of course, you are the best of the bunch, so I'm sure you will all do very well, but still beware, it is not going to be easy.
I see.
So how should you prepare? The best way to prepare is to prepare for a long exam where you have to be efficient in the way you answer the questions.
Mhm.
So you go over my lab, you do it once, and it takes you maybe half an hour, 2 hours to write it. I don't know how long. And then you're like, okay, so I think I understand. Well, no, not good enough. You start over and you do all of it. And then, whoops, you are able to do it quite better and in 30 minutes. And then not good enough. You go again over it, and then it takes you 20 minutes. And you get super efficient. Because at some point, the questions look more or less like they would look like on my lab, but maybe a bit easier. But so if you become very good at identifying what's being asked and answering it quickly, you're going to be to do very well. But yeah, know that it's not good enough to just know it more or less. Yeah, that's my point.
I see. And the exam, is it multiple choice or short answers or long answers?
So yeah, last time it was online and multiple choice.
Okay.
I haven't, so we haven't written it yet, so I don't know how it's going to look like. But my guess is it's very likely that it is a multiple choice, just because for people who grade it, it would be
It's easier to correct.
Yeah, it would be unbearable to correct 1,000 copies.
Oh, there's 1,000 people on the course?
So I don't know exactly how many people, but what's your last question?
I said there's 1,000 people in the course.
Yeah, I don't exactly know how many, but there are 4 or 5 sections, and each one have more than 100 students. That's for sure. So yeah, you bet there are many students.
I see. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, and about calculators, my guess is you can use like a non-programmable calculator, I think. So as soon as I have more info, I'm going to give it to you. Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Will we have more practice exercises or like documents to review?
If it were me, I would give you as much as I can, but I don't control the supply of exercises. And I know that the powers that be that organize this class, they try to not just distribute too much stuff, because they're scared that the students are just going to learn by heart how to answer quickly instead of understanding the material. Here's my take on it. I think that if you do just learn to answer quickly, then you think you're being smart because you're gaming the system and just learning to answer the exam and not learning the material. My personal opinion is that by doing this, under the hood, you're actually learning stuff. So I would just distribute all the questions that I would like, but I cannot tell you that this is going to happen. So for now, what you have is you have many questions on the MyLab website. The exam is going to look like this, although maybe the trickiest are not going to be there. You have some computational thing, some question of understanding. Yeah. Drawing graphs. So a question is, will there be drawing graphs? There might be a graph there, and there are going to be questions about the graph, but from experience, asking students to draw a graph and then judging whether this artwork is worth 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, or is this axis good or bad? Is this line well drawn, or that's a complete mess. So I would be surprised if we did ask you to draw graphs with supply and demand and stuff on it, because it just to grade it is complicated. So I know need to get the parabola. What you're saying is to draw a parabola. Yeah, you don't have to learn how to draw a parabola, but yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that. So okay, if there are, so this is my best guess. So if there are graphs to draw, they will give you the numbers. They will say like you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then for 1 you have 10.2, for 2 you have 12.4, and then for 3 it goes back down to 9.8, for instance. So then what you would be actually drawing would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you would have yeah, 0.1 would be here, and then 0.2 would be here, and then 0.3 would be lower, and then 0.4. So yeah, maybe it creates a parabola, but you don't have to know the formula of a parabola. You just have to be able to draw the points and the. But again, I would be surprised that they would ask something as technical as this at the exam. So never know. It's better to understand how graphs work, because we are actually asking you questions about how to represent data. So it's always safer to know, to learn it. Yeah, and so anything I tell you is up to my best knowledge, but yeah, I'm not the one who decides the basic things. I'm going to review it for sure and see whether I think questions is good or is bad. Polynomial functions, no. This I'm pretty sure you don't have to know polynomial functions.
So you're saying the best way to like study and make sure we're prepared is to just go over the labs?
Yeah, the labs and all the material you have on the Pearson website, so the My Lab. So there are like practice questions, and when you're done with the labs, at some point there's the possibility to do it again, so you can just practice it again. Yeah. For the final exam, there is going to be a practice final, but sadly not for the midterms. And if you're desperate, maybe you can find like examples of questions on the internet. I don't. Maybe I shouldn't tell you to do that, but at some point, be smart. Find things that are useful for you. All right. So, other questions?
Excuse me, Professor.
Yeah.
I was curious, does a quota, if it's set below the market equilibrium, would producers, are they being forced to produce at a quota, or are they allowed to like I guess I should answer my own question. I guess producers are, when a quota is in effect, they're forced to produce at that quota. They're not allowed to deviate from whatever the quota is set to.
Oh, that's an awesome question. So let me go back to that. So here's the quota. So what we're saying is we want to limit what's going on in the market at Q1. But if I'm a sort of rogue maple syrup producer,
yeah,
because there are rogue maple syrup producers who just say, oh, I don't like the all control on the market that the government is having, and I'm going to sell whatever I want at the price I want. So what's up with that? Well, you could, in principle, sell. So since the market price is now at P1, then you could decide, oh, I'm going to, at P1 is a very good price for me, and I'm ready to produce a very large quantity up to this big quantity over there, and you would just pocket a whole lot of money if you did that.
But that's
So,
the black market there, though, right?
Yeah, but it's a different black market. It's not people who buy low and sell high. It's producers or rogue producers who don't comply with the, and we're going to see that a lot when we talk about cartels. And by the way, it's a big money in there. So you can bet that sometimes crime isn't far, and if you just don't abide by the quota, then maybe you have problems with the mafia and all of this stuff. Because it may, for them, they really want to create an artificially small supply so they can pocket a high price.
Yeah. But generally, for producer, like let's just stick with a regular, like I guess, abiding producer. If a quota. Wait, is there a different types of quotas or like no? I guess what I rather would ask is, if a quota, for instance, is like set above the market equilibrium, does that mean, like, is the government trying to tell producers to produce at that amount or less or more? Like, is there like, you know how it's sort of like a price ceiling and price floor? Price ceiling, it's like you're not allowed to produce above it, but you can produce below it if you want.
Oh, here I can set a quota here, but it just doesn't do anything. Anyways, producers,
because you would just
they don't want to produce more.
Yeah, because you would just want to produce at market equal. Okay, I get it. Actually, that makes sense. Okay, thank you so much.
But it's the same as, but your intuition is good. It's the same as setting a price floor that's actually lower than the market equilibrium. Then who cares? Anyways, people want to exchange at $10, so it doesn't matter to say that you're forced to sell above 5. So,
yeah, I see. No, that makes sense. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, well, anyway, if you have other questions, I'm going to hop in back at 10:30 for the office hours, and you can ask further questions there. But yeah, I'm going to end the class right now. So thanks, everyone. And yes, next class is in person. Thanks for the kind words. I would say normal, like non-programmable, maybe. Yeah, I guess. But yeah, non-graphic, I guess. Yeah. Have a good day, everybody.